So we've seen forms take input from the user, and then we take that input and create a new page that includes some of the user input in that new page we create. Which rings a little bell. My security class said, hey, if you ever take input from a user, be really careful about security concerns. Okay, well, I have a form here, so this is our little sample. What is your quest? Coffee. What is your favorite color? Coffee. Okay, sounds good. So I go ahead and submit this. We get a web page, and sure enough, we see it must be tough to seek coffee. Okay, and we know exactly why that is there on the page. I'm going to scroll down to see what the form handler did. But we have some echo statements. Echo, it must be tough to seek, and then we took underscore post of quest, use the name corresponding to that input back in the form. Okay, and sure enough, whatever post of quest is exactly the characters that the user had typed back there. So now, back to the form here, is there anything a user might type in that might cause a problem? So that when we splice the user's input into our web page, we get something that suddenly is not valid HTML anymore. That would be a problem. My whole program, the purpose of my program is to print a valid HTML page. Okay, so if the user comes along and prints something like hi, angle bracket /p to end a paragraph. Whoa. Yeah, when I look at that, sure enough, I'll see it must be tough to seek hi, and then on a new line, well, yeah, if somebody saw this end result, they're like, well, that's a weird thing to put in. First of all, I typed in angle brackets as part of the thing that I'm questing for. Why are there no angle brackets showing up here? So maybe a valid user would have an issue that's saying, hey, I'm not seeing what I actually typed in. And an attacker might say, oh, look, I managed to make them see create a web page that looks kind of funny that has an extra paragraph break in it. Ooh-wee, I'm going to rule the world with this evil attack I've come up with. Well, first of all, if the attacker had done that, who's going to see this web page that got created? Oh, just the attacker. The web page is sent back to the attacker. We'll come back to that. Are there other things that could be typed in instead of an paragraph tag? Yeah, I mean, how about just angle bracket B? And now, gosh, suddenly my whole page has gone into bold format. By the way, B, of course, is a deprecated tag. You should use CSS if you want to turn text bold. But I could have entered a strong tag, I guess. Same thing. Okay, and this is both this and the previous one are malformed HTML. What does my browser happen to do with malformed HTML? It tries its best to do something with it. In retrospect, I would have preferred if browser said, sorry, invalid HTML, I'm not going to show you anything. That would force people writing HTML to really make sure they got their HTML right. An open B tag that never closes and goes across paragraphs and stuff like that. Yeah, everything down here is all bolded. Yeah, even the source code that's getting printed. So, okay, whatever. Yeah, from a security concern, could we even do worse? Again, if an attacker typed this in, well, they're just going to see this themselves. Yeah, what's a tag that is probably bad? Script tags are bad. And we can do something like alert. Whoa. Put JavaScript between a script tag. I'm going to say alert of 37 instead. Followed by haha. And let's see what this does. I'm not even quite sure. This did not go ahead and actually seem to run a script, but it did give so something my browser's being smart here, but it did give some stuff that wasn't there. The word alert doesn't show up on the page either. We can do a show source, see what the browser actually got, and sure enough, it must be tough to seek hi script alert 37 and bracket script. So I think what happened, and it turns out there's some other safeguards that are going in here. The biggest thing is, since I didn't say script type equal JavaScript, then that didn't, my browser chose not to run this as JavaScript. It didn't really know what language the script was supposed to be in. It ignored it rather than giving an error. That's maybe a different issue, that it didn't give an error, but fair enough. And we'll see in a future video that putting in quotes in the input form, there's a separate step that's trying to, a little bit too hard to protect me against things. It makes it hard to actually demo an alert here. Although, now back to, but hopefully you understand that, yeah, somebody could inject a JavaScript program, and that doesn't seem like a good thing. But again, who would an attacker be attacking if they did that? So everybody says, oh yeah, this is now a vulnerability. Well, it is a vulnerability, but you need to explain more how it can possibly be a vulnerability, because, okay, I'm typing some stuff into a form, have a script here, whatever runs is, or whatever gets printed back. So we send back to the browser, or the person who typed it in, back to the attacker's browser, and it's going to run JavaScript on their computer. And for an attacker to manage to get their own code run on their own computer is not that big a feat, actually. Of course they can run code on their own computer. So why is this a vulnerability? I mean, it certainly is a vulnerability, but not for a kind of a subtle reason, or a more roundabout reason. Cross-site scripting. So if you just said cross-site scripting, great, but explain to me why that's bad. I'll let you pause and think about it, perhaps. And the answer is, well, it's not bad until we do more stuff with that, until my server does more with the information. If my server just created a new web page, sent it back to you, yeah, my server could really care less what you entered as your request, and nothing ever changed on the server and nothing happened. But suppose I took what you entered as your request. Not only did I go ahead and generate a page and send it back to you, which, you know, again, doesn't hurt the server, but maybe I took your request and stored it away in a database. Okay, no problem. Somewhere in a database is a list of people's names and quests, and one person's quest happens to have an angle bracket script in it. Okay. But now maybe, here's what might happen is maybe there's an administrator on the server side who goes through the database and says, I'm going to go up and look at everybody's quests and view them in my browser. If that happens, then what happens on the browser of this administrator, that browser is going to be suddenly running some JavaScript. And now the attacker has gotten somebody else's computer to run their JavaScript. So just remember, when you say cross-site scripting, there's a couple extra steps that have to happen. Just because I can get a JavaScript to get executed, I have to get it executed on somebody else's computer for it to be a useful attack. Okay, so, but now just back to whatever. Even if there's not a script going, I mean, that's certainly bad, but even if there's not a script tag and there's just this B tag going on, yeah, I still don't like that just as the person writing this code, because you've caused my program to generate invalid HTML. The whole purpose of my program is to generate valid HTML, and now you've made me look foolish, if nothing else. So I can't even write a program that generates valid HTML. Okay. What should we do? I guess you could do, I mean, one answer some people say is, oh yeah, we're going to go and when you submit the form, we're not going to allow the user to enter an angle bracket character. And I'm going to have special JavaScript saying this character is not allowed. And if you try using JavaScript, try submitting, the JavaScript will intercede and say something. That's just a bad user interface experience. Like, there's no reason why somebody can't have an angle bracket in their request. I want to find some number that is less than 3. I think they should be able to say that's their request, and my computer shouldn't deny them that. So yeah, arbitrarily telling the user they can't use certain characters, kind of a cop-out. Second of all, we'll see later that, yeah, if you go and request my form handler and provide some information, you didn't have to necessarily come from my form. You could provide key value pairs that still include an angle bracket. Even my form has JavaScript to try to stop that. People can circumvent the form and just submit straight to the URL the form submits to if they craft the packet that has the right key value pairs. And there are tools that certainly do that for you. Or I guess even easier, they could just turn off JavaScript on their side and then submit the form. Okay. So, here's the problem. There are 3 levels that we need to concern ourselves with here. There's what the browser renders. That's what most people in the world worry about. Hey, what do things look like on the screen? In Web 1, we learned about HTML, and we learned how certain HTML renders a certain way on the screen. We learned about how to make things, how to make paragraphs, and how to make ordered lists, and all that sort of stuff. We learned about all those HTML tags. And then in this class, we're actually thinking about a 3rd level, the program that prints the HTML that's going to be given to the browser to be rendered. Okay, so there's this, that's what Web 2 is. We're adding this extra layer on. So, what the browser renders, if they entered angle bracket B, I'd want to say something like, it must be tough to seek high angle bracket B, angle bracket ha ha ha. That's what I would like to see rendered in the browser, okay? What HTML, now here's a Web 1 question, what HTML do I need to provide to give the browser so that it will render this on the screen where the angle bracket is what shows up on the screen, okay? We've already seen that if I just go ahead and give this as the HTML, that we don't get what we want rendering on the screen. We get that angle bracket B. The browser doesn't realize that it's data, that this high angle bracket B haha is data. It goes ahead and thinks that it's part of the HTML structure. And that's the injection attack that's happened. Okay, so now go review your Web 1, say, hey, I can get an angle bracket to render inside a browser. How do you do it? And you do a little web search and say, oh, there's certain characters that you can't include, like angle bracket, I guess interpret it as a tag. Aha, go ahead and put ampersand LT semicolon. These 4 characters here, I'm going to put a space around them for a second. These 4 characters here are special to HTML, so HTML markup for an, you know the buzzword? The technical term, an entity. HTML has tags, it has attributes, which are actually key value pairs, and entities. Okay, so those are the 3 basic data definition things we have going on in HTML, tags, and plain text, regular text. So you have tags, attributes, entities, and text. Okay, so entities, if you don't know that term, you do now. I will point out that using the term entity as a technical term is probably the worst technical term I've ever come across. I mean, what is not an entity in English? Yeah, the English word is doing nothing to tell me what sort of thing it actually is. But okay, for better or for worse, we're stuck with the name entities. Again, they forgot to ask me when they designed the web. So Tim Berners-Lee, I apologize. It's okay. I forgive you. So HTML given to the browser. If we give it those 4 characters, and then instead of a greater than, we'll give it ampersand GT. GT for greater than, LT for less than. Yeah, those go ahead and will generate the characters that we want to have, okay? By the way, sometimes, here's a side issue, people are sometimes confused about which one is greater than and which one is less than, or those 2 symbols. Really, you should know those 2 symbols, but it's pretty easy to tell when you say, 5 is greater than 4 or something like that. You have 2 lines going on, and when the lines are far apart, that's on the side that is big, it's next to the big thing. And where the lines are close together or touching even, that's on the small side of the inequality. By the way, if the 2 lines are exactly parallel, then if the distance between the 2 lines is equal, then the 2 things on the either side are equal. That's where that notation comes from. So it's thinking of an equal sign, and then, oh yeah, this side, these things are close, the things over here are closer, I'm going to angle them. And, oh no, the thing over here is closer together. Put these close together and put that side farther apart. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so great. Let's go ahead and write code so that if we are given, now remember the post array contained those characters in blue, that's what the person entered. When I look up in the post array, that's the string that I pull out of the post array. It has an angle bracket in it because that's what the input was that was provided. If I want to take that and turn it into valid HTML that renders just like this string looks, well, I need to take that string, and here's what I need to do. I need to walk through that string and angle bracket, hey, replace that with &LT semicolon. Be greater than, okay. Could we go ahead and write a function that does this? You give it a string, it returns another string that looks just the same, except wherever it sees this character angle bracket less than, it replaces it with &LT semicolon. Yeah, in fact, I could assign that problem in Java 1 as an awesome first semester programming task once you've introduced loops. Loop through a string, make a new string that has all the same characters, except when you see this one character, you replace it with these 4 different characters. You don't need to know anything about the web or HTML to know how to write that function. You may not understand why you're being told to choose greater than and &GT semicolon. And actually there's several pairs, greater than, less than, and a few others we'll mention in a moment. Yeah, so we can write a function that takes a string, looks for certain characters, makes substitutions, otherwise gives back the same string. Yeah, so here's what our program to look like. It will see, right now our program was something like tough to seek, and then underscore post of quest, I think was the name in the array. Okay, I'm going to take off the word tough so this all fits on one line. Okay, but basically this is what we had, right? That's what we had before. Here's what I want. I want to go and make a function, this string here, I want to take the string and I want to apply this helper I just talked about. Hey, here's a string, give me back a new string just like it, except that any special characters have been sanitized. We'll say, hey, any special HTML characters have been sanitized, is the terminology we'll use. So yeah, I want to say, call something like sanitize of this thing. Of course, I'll put this on 2 lines here so it's not split across a line. Yeah, so this is what we want. I want some helper function called sanitize. I should probably use a better name. I should probably call it like HTML sanitize. Because you can talk about sanitizing for SQL, sanitizing for whatever languages. And the way I think about sanitizing is I really think I have 2 data types going on in my program. It looks like I'm using strings, nothing but strings. But in my head, here's the data types I have. I have one data type called string of HTML, okay? And I have another data type called raw data, raw string, okay? And what I got from the user was a raw string. It wasn't meant to be HTML, okay? What I print needs to be HTML. And so I think of this HTML sanitize, really that's a conversion function. It's a function that takes a raw data and produces something of type string of HTML rather than string of raw characters, okay? Type systems don't tend to have those 2 types built into them. You can imagine going and having a Java library where you do have a type called HTML string and a type called raw data string. You might just use string for your raw data string. And then you could have conversion functions. And then if you did that, by the way, you could actually have the type checker give you a warning. If you were trying to print something that was a raw string and you're trying to print it and claiming, hey, I'm returning a string of HTML, your type system could alert you to this injection attack. Okay. Our type system doesn't do that. We're thinking of the types in our head, raw string and HTML string, and we're calling a conversion function ourselves. Given a raw string, return me an HTML string. HTML sanitize may not be the best name, but we'll find out PHP's name and how much worse it is in a moment. What does this function HTML sanitize do? Again, very simple, but it looks for less than and greater than, replaces them with certain entities. There are a few other characters, just a few, that when you have a raw data string if you gave it to a browser, the browser might get confused and thinks they're HTML characters, part of the HTML structure, and not a raw string. Greater than and less than are the big ones, because the browser sees those and says, oh, I think you're making a tag. I don't think that's raw data. Turns out, a total of 5 special characters. We've seen 2 of them already. Okay, greater than, less than. The remaining ones, Well, it turns out quote, single quote, and double quote are a little bit special because inside in HTML, when you're talking about an attribute value, you need to put those in quotes. If the attribute value itself contained a quote character, because again, attribute values are just data, yeah, then you couldn't use a single quote if you started, yeah, you'd have to be careful about that. So those are a little bit special. Greater than, less than, single quote, double quote, which leaves one other character that's special to HTML. Can you name it? Hint, we've seen it today. It may have been the first time you saw it today, depending on your web one. Ampersand, the character that browsers say, hey, this is part of the entity structure, okay? I guess semicolon too, but it's ampersand. If we can take care of ampersand, we'll be okay. Entity names can't themselves contain an ampersand, so there's no issue there. Okay, so there's 5 special characters. HTML sanitize needs to go through my string and look for those 5 special characters. And it turns out that's exactly what it does. By the way, do we need to write HTML sanitize ourselves? Whew, no, it's built into PHP. So you guys are happy. It's like, oh, I don't need to write test cases and learn about, you need to be an HTML expert to write this function because you need to know these 5 characters, and exactly these 5 characters are the only ones I need to worry about. Okay, it turns out this function is not, it is built into PHP. It's not called HTML sanitize because that would make too much sense. It's called HTML special chars. Again, that's up there in choice of poor function names. It doesn't return HTML special chars. It sanitize it. Yeah. Anyway, okay. So let's go ahead and just look for HTML special chars PHP. And of course, if you forget the name of the function, talk about PHP sanitize. A web search will hopefully lead you to this function. Looking in the PHP manual, and sure enough, you can just see that it's there. HTML special chars takes in a string. Go ahead and look at these other possible optional attributes you can put in. If square brackets means optional, it's optional that you can follow it by another input called flags. Okay. And by the way, if you don't pass flags, it has a default value ent_compat or bitwise or ent HTML 401. Okay, whatever. There's more stuff to figure out what that means, but I always think of HTML special chars as taking in a string, and rarely do I use those other things, but you can read about them. And again, if you're not sure, a side note, what's an awesome way to document your program, what this function should do? Gosh, if you give me one example, it'd be really nice. And so they do, you have to scroll down a ways, but we do go ahead and they give all the details before they actually get to showing us an example. Here we are, examples. HTML special chars, and if you give it the string here, starting with less than a, sure enough, it says, hey, the string we're going to get back is &LT semicolon a space. And then tick marks actually turn into these numeric things because they're also at the same time as this test case, they're showing off what this ent quotes parameter means and does. I'm like, no, give me a test case. Start with the simplest test case. The default, give me one real simple string and show what it does. Okay. By the way, what are the 5 characters it substitutes? Hey, if you see this character, replace it with these 4 characters. If you see this character, the ampersand, replace it with these 5 characters, and so on. And double quotes and single quotes also get turned on to either quote or apos or apostrophe. Okay, so good. How do we fix our web form? Don't print post of quest, print HTML special chars of post of quest. Do this for every single time you are taking raw data that you got from a user and presenting it, splicing it into a web page, and you're not meaning to splice in any actual markup. I say this if you get this information from a user, but even if you pull a string out of a database, okay, and are putting into a web page, if it's of type raw data string, actual characters, which it probably is, and should be, then go ahead and call HTML special chars right before you put it into a string that is HTML. So, okay, we're going to come back next time and talk about new lines. We're going to talk about and how those should get handled, as well as a few other minor things here. But the big takeaway, hey, if you print if you take information that you got from the user and are creating a web page, convert it from raw data string to HTML representation of that string by calling the function HTML sanitize. Oops, I mean HTML special chars in PHP. That's all.